and I'll admit them. But in the meantime, I'll hand over to Tony and Irene.
Thank you very much, Sukaina, and thank you, Bonnie and Samantha, for this wonderful, stimulating and searching conversation we've just had. We're going to go into something a little bit different. But first, maybe I'm going to ask, you've heard a little bit about me. Maybe I'll ask Irene if she can just introduce herself just for a minute or two, and then we'll launch in.
Oh, it would have been easier for you to introduce me. How do you introduce me? My name is Irene. I am joining you from Malindi, the coast of Kenya. I'm one of the online facilitators for Merge Africa. And yeah, I think that's enough for now. Yeah, back to you, Tony.
Thank you, Irene. Okay, we're going to focus on having a little bit of input and then a conversation for the bulk of the time that we've got. And we're going to start off with a liberating structure that a lot of people might know of, called the Waterfall, where there is going to be a little prompt in the chat. And then we ask if you can put your input into the text box and just wait until we say go. And then we have this waterfall of text going down the chat screen. So the first prompt is, when I hear the words liberating structures, what I think is, and if you can put your answer into the text box, so we're looking like phrases, short sentences, not paragraphs. Okay, what do you think of? Okay, just wait a bit before you send. Oh my, okay.
Sorry, I sent.
Okay, you got people going, so let's just send them all now. Interesting. Ways to start group engagement, cool interactions, white-centered approaches. That's an interesting point. No grading, structures to liberate conversation, helping people to think free. We're going to have fun, freedom, freedom, undoing structures of something, unleashing, flexibility. Yeah, so a lot of this really is about structures that will perhaps provide support for some kind of emergence. Yeah, and Nicholas says, now I have to be active. I'm not always in the mood for breakouts. And Amina says, oof, I'm not the only one suspicious. Amina, do you want to say something about your suspicions, your deep suspicions of liberating structures? You're welcome to take the mic.
It's quite late here, so I would rather not speak out loud. Thanks.
Okay, fine. Or you can put something into the chat. You're welcome to do that as well. Because it's interesting that the associations are not totally positive for everybody all the time, and we need to take that on. Okay. And there's a good question here. Liberation from what? Just a little bit into the chat here, a link, the liberatingstructures.com website, which has a pile of marvelous resources, including the basic initial 33 liberating structures. I mean, the basic idea with liberating structures is that you're looking at the microstructures within larger structures like meetings and workshops and teaching sessions. And what you're trying to do is to avoid the mess that you get when you just say free for all completely, and to avoid the squashiness and the total killing of life and spontaneity that you get when you apply structure in an oppressive way. And what you're trying to do is to have just enough structure to liberate and unleash creativity and conversation, and get towards that edge where you're heading towards a little bit of chaos, but not to the point where you totally unleash the chaos. So unconference would be a good example of that. Okay. And yeah, I've seen liberating structures applied in groups that are not so white, including a wonderful Agile Africa workshop with a lot of people in most participants in Nigeria and Ghana. And yes, we have ways, there's a language that Nicola's pointing out, there's a language that we can use for community and engagement, right? And the question about, do the liberating structures approaches have a certain kind of meta autocratic nature built into them? And yes. And Amina, I think it gets different when it gets taken up by largely African communities. And the 3 American men, yeah, the 3 American men. Okay, so we are getting critical right in the beginning, which is a brilliant start to conversation. I'd like to use another liberating structure called celebrity interview, which is where you ask one person in the room a series of questions that can then spark a wider conversation. And I am going to ask Irene if she can be the person for the celebrity interview, so we can tap into her experience of liberating structures and the way that she uses them. So maybe, Irene, I'm going to spotlight you for everybody. Of course, it's a celebrity interview. And ask if you can unmute yourself. If you're uncomfortable being spotlit, just tell me.
That's one of the things I don't like about Zoom, being spotlighted, because I think it makes people uncomfortable. But
okay.
Yeah.
No agreement, no spotlighting.
I would rather not be spotlighted. Thank you.
Okay, but we got your voice. That's the most important thing,
Okay,
right?
Thank you.
Okay, so the first question I have for you is, how did you get started with liberating structures?
I was introduced to liberating structures in 2018 when we had a conference for Emerge Africa, an online conference, and a lady called Nancy White had a session in it and introduced it to me and to my colleagues. And that's how I started. However, later I realized that liberating structures were some of the structures that I was already using that were just put together and renamed or improved on in different ways and presented as liberating structures.
Great, because a lot of the things that good facilitators have been doing anyway for years are part of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what do you do with liberating structures?
I think I use liberating structures everywhere, including my family meetings, because liberating structures, depending on what kind of facilitator you are, or how you understand them, you can make them suit the situation that you are in. And sometimes you can mix them up. You don't have to use just one. You can mix them up so that you get your goal. So I use them in my facilitation. I use them in meetings. I use them for online and face-to-face. And of course, as I said, family meetings and any other meetings that I lead in. I love them so much, yeah.
What are your favorite structures for family meetings?
Actually, I introduced impromptu networking, which was because everybody thought that they knew each other. And I introduced impromptu networking for my family. And it was so interesting because everybody said, oh, I've learned something that I didn't know about my sister or my brother. So that was really interesting. Of course, the other one is kind of an echo cycle, but I leave out a few things from it. I pick up what I want. And you know, when we are finding out what is going on, if we have a problem, I always use the echo cycle to understand what is the problem and to bring out that and to ask them what we need to throw in the fire or what we need to let go as individuals and as family members. So those are the ones that I use mostly. Yeah.
Thank you. And what are your plans for using liberating structures in the future?
I actually introduce liberating structures to a lot of people. People who feel that, of course, like we said, and I know there's a lot of concern about the origin of the liberating structures and the language that is used and that kind of thing. But when I introduce it, I tell people read through it and pick what is important and learn from it and change the language that doesn't suit your culture, doesn't suit your environment, doesn't suit your community. You can, because we had, we used to call it the cafe, and we have the conversation cafe, which is almost similar to what we had before. So if you think about what you used to do before and what you have now and put them together, you actually get a nice brew of the coffee that you have in these cafes. So for me, I try to introduce liberating structures to as many people as possible and explain it in my own language. I don't try to make it too complicated, because if you complicate it, then you lose a lot of people in the conversation. So yeah, anytime I'm on for introducing liberating structures. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Irene. So you're basically getting us to the point where you're telling us that you've actually liberating structures from the paleness of its founders.
Yes, I think I've put in a bit of color, because also the games that are, well, the games or any interactions that are there, I try to add a bit of things that are a bit Kenyan or a bit African into it, or I change names here and there, I change the process here and there to actually suit a game that we played when we were young. So that's the way I do it, and I try to make it as simple as possible, really. Yes.
Irene, thank you for a great celebrity interview, and much applause to you for that. I think what we can now do is open the conversation. So anyone who wants the mic, please raise your hand, or if you can't take the mic for reasons of time zone, as Amina, please come into the chat and put your contribution into the chat. Okay. And so there's a question from Nicola as to how you adapted the structures to be more Kenyan. Irene, we want you back.
Oh, hi, Nicola. You know, there are some processes that, if you read through the liberating structures, there are some processes that are almost related to some cultural things, or processes that or structures that we used as we were growing up. So usually I kind of make them suit that structure that we used when we were young, by either the process that I take it through or the language that I use during these liberating structures. And that's how I make it Kenyan. The other thing is the language. I try as much as possible to be sensitive to whoever is in the room, because you'll say one thing and people will get offended very easily. So in Kenya, we have 42 tribes, 43 going to 45. We have very many tribes. So you have to think about all these tribes and their cultures and where you are at any one time, and the mix that's in the room. Actually, it even gets better when there are people from other countries or other African countries and even other continents. So you have to think about how you are doing all of that and how it's going to suit everybody in the room, from the Kenyans to everybody else here. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you. Yes, and Amina's saying, really enjoyed reading a bit about LS and the question about being managed out and touching on learned practices. Sukaina says these are important examples for face-to-face and online classroom where people might presume the regular vanilla LS might work without context. Everything requires context. And Laura, an alternative to bring into play when people talk about Socratic method, as if that was the be-all and end-all. Remember, Socrates was really a bully. Scary. Okay. And yeah, any other questions or comments from your experience, your ideas about using liberating structures, perhaps? Please feel free to raise your hand and just then you can take the mic. Or, go for it.
Yeah, perhaps as people think about the questions or the contribution that they have, is that I realized that liberating structures is something that you need to practice over and over, or be in a room when it's being used and just find out how you can use it in your own situation. So I think the one that is written is just a guidance, and then you decide how the process will go forward. Yeah. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Irene. And I'd just like to ask a question using the reactions. Who here has learned liberating structures in face-to-face settings? If you can use the yes or the hands up in your reactions. Learned liberating structures face-to-face. Okay. Who's learned liberating structures online? Okay. So there are a few of us here who learned liberating structures online. Nobody actually learned it in a face-to-face workshop from the group we've got here today. So it's going to raise interesting questions about repurposing from online environments to face-to-face environments where we're not sending people into breakouts anymore, for example. And Laura learns everything online. Okay, so any other thoughts, questions, speculations? Well, you know, Laura, Zoom is face-to-face, but I suppose you could actually say, is it face-to-face or is it, you know, am I seeing your face or am I seeing your pixels? But we can convince ourselves that it's face-to-face. It's a satisfying and necessary illusion. Okay. And Irene, thanks for sharing this link with a whole folder of resources about using liberating structures virtually. Okay, so if anyone who hasn't learned liberating structures is starting to get intrigued, where does that intrigue come from? And what would you be looking for? Alice, you're also in the room, I see. Alice, another of our colleagues from Emerge Africa. Alice, would you like to tell us about how you use liberating structures in organizational settings? And feel free to switch on your vid if you can and to take the mic.
You don't want to see what I'm doing as I talk to you. So
okay, let's hear. That's fine. Sound is good.
Thanks, Sukaina. I struggled a bit to get on, so I came on board a bit late. We use liberating structures in our organization. I work, other than Emerge, I work for an organization called Conservation South Africa, and we are quite a large team of people. We're about 50, but we're spread in about 5 different offices. So we have a mixture of face-to-face and remote interactions. And especially during COVID, we started using liberating structures, the online versions, to try and when we have like all staff meetings where we'd all come on board for a Teams meeting. I am teamed out, but we would use Liberating Structures to give people the opportunities to basically share their ideas and feel that they were contributing and interacting with very large meetings. So that's one of the ways in which we've been using Liberating Structures. I'm using things like waterfalls and so on and so forth, just to make sure that everybody feels that they have an opportunity to speak, especially when you're online and you've got like 45 or 50 people online. That's how we've been using it. But we also use it for when we're doing some of our strategic planning and things like that.
Alice, one of the points raised earlier in this room is the sense that Liberating Structures may be very pale, given that it originated in North America with white founders. And Irene was talking about making Liberating Structures Kenyan. What do you do to make Liberating Structures South African, and particularly Black South African?
That's an interesting question. And I like the way Irene dealt in the way that she answered it. I think it's, you know, culturally, for example, I've got a very young team of people, like 20 young people under me in my group, and I am probably older than some of their mothers. And I find that culturally, there is not that inclination to kind of speak above an elder or challenge an elder. And what has been interesting with using Liberating Structures is to start, it's about the way you present it to them and give the kids the freedom to be able to speak up and be heard. Because culturally, if I say this is it, that's how generally it used to be taken. So I don't know. South African kids are very vocal, Tony, you know this, and have lots to say and feel entitled to say whatever. So I don't know how to make it more South African, except to make sure that the people that I am dealing with, especially the young people who culturally might not be as comfortable stepping into those spaces of speaking up, are given the opportunity to speak up and feel that they are heard and that they can trust the space. I don't know if I've answered your question.
You've answered it in the way that you answer it. That's great. Thank you, Alice. I'm wondering, okay, so you're getting a contribution from Amina. This is not just about a pale or white tone. It's really about this issue of whether it is tied to upholding whiteness. I think that's a very powerful point. And the idea that from Irene, Liberating Structures can make everyone feel equal and encourage people who would be silent to speak, to take a place of being peers rather than being silenced by hierarchy. Okay, and Laura, about, is this a conversation we want to have at our schools? Certainly at University of Cape Town, this conversation about whiteness and blackness is certainly starting to take off after a long time. Okay, yeah, space for more voices. If you want to use your voice rather than your text, you're welcome to do that. And let's give a minute or two for that, and then I think we'll wrap up this conversation. Okay, anyone who wants to come in with their voice? Irene.
Okay, so when Liberating Structures started and everybody was excited about it, at first it was just learning about the structures, then people started reading more and understanding them more, and they realized that actually liberating structures were very white. As I said, the three guys who wrote the liberating structures or put them together were actually three white men from America, North America. So I guess, because I don't like assuming anything, I guess they wrote it from their understanding or how they understood it or whatever, from whatever basics. But at the moment, anyone who is in liberating structures actually is welcome on the table to change the language, to change the approach, to change quite a number of things that are in the liberating structures. And that's why when you look at the original liberating structures and the virtual ones that are being redone, you see a big difference in the language that he used, in the process that you can use, and the difference in the steps that you can take. So I think for me, if you look at it from your own perspective and block out the noise, you can actually benefit a lot from liberating structures. You just go there and say, these are good structures. Let me read, let me use the language that I understand, the culture that I understand, and then I can make good use of it. It's just like books. Most books, the original books we read mostly were written by white people when I went to school. But we later, picked what we wanted. Some of it was racist, some of it was colorism, some of it was tribalism. But we picked what we wanted and gained what we wanted out of it, and whatever we didn't want, we sieved it off. So just sieve and take the beauty of liberating structures. Thank you, John. Back to you.
Thank you, Irene, and thanks to the comments from Amina. We hoping that allyship and things like actionable LS will become the standard. And a comment from Danielle. Sometimes structure needs to be strengthened to ensure that marginalized voices get to be heard. And it's very easy to get the marginalized voices to be heard in breakouts. What about in plenaries? I think that might be one of the issues. Laura on salvaging the old books for a better world. Okay. And I just love the way that, Irene, that you are appropriating or reappropriating LS in a way that liberating structures. So thank you for talking so eloquently about this. Okay. Irene, it looks like you've got another fan here. Great. Okay, so I think we can actually start to wrap this up before steam runs out of conversation. I'm going to put something else into the chat for another waterfall. And I would encourage you, if you could please just wait with your answer in the text box until I say go, and then we have this waterfall, actual waterfall. Okay, so the first prompt is, what I take from this conversation is, if you can just put your short answer into the text box, what do you take from this conversation? Okay, so let's end. Okay, power of critical approaches, take what you want, block out the noise, new people to connect with, brilliance of Irene, LS, and great folks. Don't erase power structures can be a tool. Flexibility, openness, contextualize LS. Thank you, great. And I'm going to close with a question that comes up a lot in LS, which is, okay, and Danielle, our systems need to be re-examined to find more benefits for the whole community, not just the minority, not just the dominant ones. Okay, and the last prompt is how I feel now is. If you put your answer in the text box and just wait a few seconds. Okay, so just send your answers. Super conscious, energized, coffee, please coffee, curious to learn more aware of the issues, comfortable, inspired, grateful for conversation, creative practices. Irene is liberated. Wow. And Bonnie is excited to connect. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I think this closes this part of the conversation. And Sukaina is reminding us, please share this track, get in more topics for my topic, bring your own topic. We're going to be bringing some topics from Emerge Africa for the next few sessions as well over the next in July and August. Happy to hand back to Sukaina, and thanks for opening this opportunity to all of us, Sukaina.
Thank you very much. That was amazing. I'm not going to take any more of your time. I think we're just leaving this session with such amazing energy and connection between us. But let's continue amongst in MYFest. So I hope to see more of you in other MYFest sessions. And I'm just plugging the bring your own topic. I think it's really, this first session has really met what we hoped, would emerge. And I'm just so excited about all the possible conversations that just bringing together people in community, sharing authentically can do. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, and a good sleep, Amina.